Well, hello there, and welcome to my Almost Midlife Crisis, the show that dives into that tricky time in our lives when we're no longer young, but we aren't old yet either. I'm your host, Jennifer Villamil. This week marks the beginning of my third trimester and the end of my 30s. Wow, how did that happen? I'm officially 28 weeks pregnant, and I have made the turn to that final stretch of my pregnancy in more ways than one. Oh, yeah, that was a pregnancy joke about stretch marks, folks, in case you weren't sure. Hey, if you can't laugh about it, you're just going to cry sometimes. So I choose to laugh. But you know what? It's also the end of my 30s. It's like I timed it that way. This week, we're going to be talking about the second trimester, and from what I hear, the best one. So if you're looking to have some fun today and hear about some much needed positivity about pregnancy, you know what? Then this one's for you. Let's dive in. I mentioned in episode 6, creating your mommy tribe, that I joined the app Peanut, which is a social networking app for pregnant women and moms. And recently, I was in the app reading a post talking about the very real truth for a lot of first time moms. The truth is that a lot of what we hear is just pure negativity. Like negativity around pregnancy, around birth, around motherhood, just like cynical, bad news. And, first it's about the pregnancy symptoms and how bad they are and how they're going to get worse in the third trimester. And you're just going to be huge and you're going to be bloated and swollen and forget about sleep. You can't sleep anymore. And, you name it, like you name it about the third trimester. Then it's these like horror stories about giving birth, which like we need more to be worried about when it comes to pushing a human being out of our vagina. But these like horror stories about how doctors can fail you or how painful postpartum recovery is or how once the baby's born, no one seems to care about you anymore and how you're recovering. And trust me, there's so much more. And then it's negativity about motherhood itself, like how you and your partner are going to fight and like 67% of marriages like fail or struggle during the first 3 years, and how you're going to have zero sleep. Like, say goodbye to your sleep. You should sleep now. Like, you can just store sleep. Like, people realize that there's no bank for sleep, right? Like, I could sleep all day, every day for my third trimester, and that's not going to make me less tired when the baby comes. Like, I don't understand that logic. Like, you can't reserve the feeling of rest. So I don't know. But, in general, it's like about motherhood, just how hard it's going to be in every aspect of your life. My favorite, and please read the sarcasm in that tone. My favorite is how your life will never be the same, but not in a nice way. Like, your life will never be the same because you'll have this beautiful new addition to your family that you never realized you could love as much as you do. Not that kind of way, but rather your life will never be the same as you know it, and you will no longer matter and you'll be tired and miserable kind of way. Now, don't get me wrong. I am sure that this happens because people are just trying to prepare you for how hard parenthood could be. Like, maybe they wish that they were warned or told more of the negative elements before they became parents, right? And I'm sure that their intentions are good. However, as a first time parents, like, let's just follow the old saying, if you have nothing nice to say, maybe don't say anything at all unless I ask. Like, if I want to know, please tell me. But like, if I'm just going about my business, like, you don't need to inject just like pure negativity in. Like, being a first time parent is scary and exciting all at the same time. Like, I have zero qualms about how hard it's going to be. Of course it's hard. Of course it's hard. You created a human being from scratch that then literally was pushed into the world where every single sight and sound and feeling is brand new and they have no idea what the hell is going on. And you're the only source of truth in this crazy world. And they need you to help them navigate the good, the bad, and you know what? The bullshit of life. When half of the time, we ourselves are just trying to figure it out. Having a kid is the biggest responsibility we will ever take on as human beings. And with that comes more pressure than we may know what to do with, especially if you're type A parents like Christian and I. Now, of course, being a parent is hard. Of course it is. I'm not saying it's not. Because you know what? If it's not, I would venture to say that you aren't taking it as seriously as maybe you should be. Like, we all know it'll be hard. We also know that it will be harder than we currently realize because you never really know until you are in the moment. And because of that point, no matter how much I hear from others on how hard it's going to be, it doesn't matter. Like, it literally does not matter. It won't matter because until we are in those shoes, we won't get it. We won't get it. Like, you could tell me all day long, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, how hard it's going to be to have a kid. And it will go over my head every single time because I'm not going to get it until I do it, right? So, I don't know, maybe just spare us the nightmare scenario then and just like let us enjoy this time. Because you know what? My first trimester sucked. It sucked pretty hard. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat that one. Okay. I felt horrible. I was worried that there would be an issue and that it was mostly like just filled with this hesitancy to get too excited because I was afraid something was going to go wrong. And then you added the fact that I was laid off in, the middle of it. So that didn't help. But compared to the first trimester, the second trimester pretty much has felt like a high from a great drug. And not to say that it's been easy peasy because it hasn't, but comparatively, it was a breeze. And the majority of my symptoms, pretty much disappeared at the start of the second trimester. I had more energy. I wasn't constipated or bloated anymore. And I could pretty much live my normal life. I was able to I went to Europe, I went to Seattle, and I made a quick, like, random last minute trip to Florida. And I even had a romantic weekend away with Christian for our wedding anniversary. I found some cute maternity clothes that I didn't really hate along the way. And you know what? Let me give you a couple tips on maternity clothes because unlike non-alcoholic wine, there are some real gems out there when it comes to maternity clothes. So I want to share what I found. So maybe it will help you. So if you're like me, I'm not trying to spend a lot on maternity clothes. I love clothes and I love buying clothes and I love, expressing myself through clothes, but like when it comes to maternity clothes, I only plan on wearing these a short while. And I am pregnant for 2 seasons, right? I have summer and I have fall. So there's even less of a reason for me to spend too much during any one season. The first thing I did, and I think everyone should do, is first of all, just go through your closet. Just go through your closet. And first of all, pack up any clothes that are tight and that are not going to last your pregnancy. So you can make room for any new clothes that you need to buy. Also, to be honest, it's so you're not constantly faced with like a bunch of clothes that don't fit. That's never a good idea, actually. If you want to just stay like mentally positive, like holding on to those pair of jeans that you consider your skinny jeans because one day you're going to fit back into them, like don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. Like that's so much pressure. And I will say, as I was doing that, I never really realized how tight my clothes were until I went through this process. Like apparently I really like form-fitted clothing. But there, you know what? There were pieces that would last, like some sundresses, right? Or like I had this cotton jumpsuit that stretches looser, which I've worn now multiple times and I love it. Or a stretchy shirts, right? Um, but start in your own closet before you spend a dime because you need to see what you have and then like what maybe you could complement or add to that, right? And that's going to save you a bunch. And then when you're thinking of buying items, you have to think flexibility. That is like the number one goal, flexibility. Can you use these pieces for mixing and matching with what you already own or with each other? I know it's super tempting to buy the really cute, like $100 outfit from Instagram that you will inevitably get served in an ad. But I I trust that you resist it unless it's a piece that you can wear a bunch of different ways. Like it's not about the quantity. It's about the fashionable versatility and comfort, I will say. Then if you need to buy clothes, a couple of my favorites that won't break the bank because, we're trying to save money for things like, well, first of all, because I'm unemployed, but also we're trying to save money for things we'll actually need, right? But I love Kindred Bravely. Super comfortable, cute clothes. They always have some sort of sale going on. And I just love their message. Like when you order clothes from them, they have like really just kind of like inspiring motivational quotes. And listen, I am a sucker for a motivational quote. like if any store or brand has a motivational quote around it, I just get sucked into that. But Kindred Bravely, they're great. Also, believe it or not, Amazon. Like I've gotten more compliments on this like $20 green dress that I bought than I ever thought that I would. Plus, if they don't fit or they don't look cute, it's super easy to return. I even bought my maternity bathing suits from Amazon, and they're really cute, actually. Like cute enough where I would wear them potentially post pregnancy. And lastly, a more recent discovery, H&M out of all places. Like I haven't been to H&M and I couldn't even tell you like how long. But I recently went there and I spent $100 and I got like 10 articles of clothing. And they were all ones that I could potentially like, even though, some of them were summer dresses, I'm like, they were long, very comfortable, simple summer dresses. I was like, well, I could easily just layer on a sweater for this in the fall and then like keep wearing it to the end. Right. So they have a ton of really cute yet really cheap stuff. And that's also not only for maternity, but also for baby and kids clothes. So something to keep in mind for the future. My other favorite little secret is Rent the Runway, actually. I've been a member of Rent the Runway for years. And because, I used to have a lot of meetings and like presentations that I needed to dress up for or like special events. So I would get like awesome designer dresses without buying them. Right. And so it was like way more cost effective for me to do that than fill up my closet and saved me room. Cause listen, I live in downtown Chicago. Like I don't have unlimited closet space. But now Rent the Runway has maternity wear, which what a great idea, I will say. Like, I don't know why they didn't have that earlier. Who wants to buy a bunch of dresses or like nicer maternity clothes that you'll just give away in a couple months? Like, we had this wedding in June and I got this amazing teal dress that fit perfectly. It made me feel sexy, like bump and all. I loved it. And I've also had multiple occasions in July that I needed like cocktail attire and I rented all of the dresses and I looked really pregnant but also really fashionable and cute and I didn't have to buy any of them. When I traveled to Europe and to Seattle, it was still pretty chilly, so I rented a pair of Page maternity jeans, which, designer jeans, but they fit great and I didn't have to buy them. And I'll probably re-rent them in the fall when it gets cool again because I was like, oh, these are actually cute. And I'm not going to go buy like maternity jeans because those are actually expensive. So you may not look like Rihanna or Beyonce, whose maternity fashion sense pretty much belongs on the cover of Vogue on a daily basis, but you can look fashionable in your own right and still feel like yourself without breaking the bank, I promise. So try it out. Now, working out has changed in the second trimester, that's for sure. And that's been kind of interesting. The bigger I get, the more I get out of breath easily. So I've adjusted my workouts to be 3 times a week strength and 3 times a week cardio. And for my strength classes, I do like a mix of Peloton weight training and Pilates reformer, both low impact, but give you like a good workout. My Pilates instructor always gives me modifications. So I love going there. And I have to say that I feel like I'm like still kind of killing it. Like, while, it's later in my second trimester and that comes with additional challenges like a definite lack of balance and difficulty maneuvering to different positions quickly, especially on the reformer machine. But I still feel the burn. Like I'm still getting a good workout. And Peloton actually has quite a few prenatal strength classes that have been really helpful. Either, you know what, sometimes it's just to figure out what modifications I need to do for like non-prenatal strength classes or just taking them on their own. And what I love about the prenatal series on Peloton is that they focus on what we can do versus what we can't. And like that's something that's really resonated with me because I'm so tired of hearing what I can't do, right? And I try to focus on the positive. So one in particular had me laughing out loud the other day that I have to share with you. So it was a class with Robin Arzón, which I love. And she, she kept saying like modifications are okay, but don't feel bad if this class feels different from one week to the next because like our bodies are changing constantly and our bodies are doing the most. And then she says, "You made an eyeball today. Who cares if you need to modify a move?" And I just started cracking up laughing. Like it's so true. She's right. Even without working out, like if you do nothing, our bodies are doing a ton of work behind the scenes right now. Like they're making eyeballs and organs and bones and skin, like you name it. Like they are doing all of that from scratch. So when you're pregnant, you tend to be hard on yourself if you aren't able to do certain moves anymore, if you have to start doing modifications or the more modifications you have to start doing. Like today, for example, I went for a walk for my cardio, which like, back in the day would not have been sufficient. Like I would have not have considered that a workout. I would have been like, "Oh, I'm just going for a walk." But like my workout was something else. But you know what? I was having some like growing pains and or round ligament pain, whatever you want to call it. And it just was like getting on a bike right now with like my knees hitting my belly doesn't sound great. So I'm just like going to go. It's beautiful outside. I'm just going to go for like a long walk. And so sometimes you have to do that. And if you're like me and you have this like long history of pretty intense workouts, like my friends joke that I'm like someone that's super intense when they work out. They're like, "Oh, if you go to a class with Jennifer, it's going to be really hard." And you know what? They aren't wrong. Like I like classes that challenge me and that push me really hard. So it's been a big change working out while pregnant. Like I continue to work out 6 days a week and I modify when necessary because, I want to make sure like I'm not insane. Like I do want to make sure that I remain safe throughout, right? But there is this part of me that thinks about what it will be like postpartum. Like, well, I need to start all over again in my fitness journey. Like, how hard is it going to be to get back into it at the level that I was? Like, how far behind my personal best will I be? But Robin is right. Like the mindset needs to be focused on what we can do, not what we cannot do. Because being pregnant is full of limitations, like limitations on what we eat and what we can carry and bending down, like you name it. So, whenever possible, focusing on what we can do is a great mental switch. And fitness is a great place for this mindset. Like I've been talking to a lot of my friends that have gone through this and like gone through pregnancy. And I'm really proud of myself for continuing to work out as much as I do. Like, yeah, I may modify, but I'm doing it. And you know what? I'm still doing more than most people do on a regular basis. And that's something to be proud of. The second trimester is definitely filled with its ups and downs. I am now down or done with pretty much all of my major tests in the latest one, the geriatric pregnancy test. I would probably consider that one was actually like a lot less hard than I heard it was going to be. But all of these tests, I would probably call them more like hurdles. Like if you relate it back to track, right? Like you're running this race, the end being birth, or maybe it should be postpartum. I don't know. But let's say the end is birth for now, because that's like all I can really fathom in my brain. Um, and each of these tests is like a hurdle. Like you have to get over the hurdle so you can continue to go, right? Or maybe if you're more into Monopoly, it's like you gotta pass go to collect $200 and keep playing. And that's what I have felt like. Like for my whole life, I was told that the longer I wait to get pregnant, the harder it will be and the more risks I'm taking on physically and medically. And up until this point, I've pretty much gotten nervous prior to every single doctor's appointment. Like I keep waiting for her to tell me something's wrong. And then after each appointment, I have this sense of relief to find out that we're still moving along slowly or smoothly. And in the second trimester, you have some pretty big hurdles to overcome. Like you have genetic testing, you have your anatomy scan, and then finally you have gestational diabetes test, which you guessed it comes with a higher risk when you're over the age of 35. Shocker. Like with everything else. For those of you that are not aware, gestational diabetes can apparently is pretty common during pregnancy and is basically like getting it's not like getting it is basically getting diabetes but temporarily because it normally goes away after pregnancy. And but while it might be temporary, it does come with like this whole host of complications for you and the baby, and it needs to be managed to ensure everyone gets to the finish line safety. So when it came time for my that's a tongue twister, gestational diabetes test, I fasted for a couple hours prior and then I drank this like sweet drink before waiting for an hour for my blood to be drawn for the test. And let me tell you, this drink should have its own Twitter handle or something. Like I have heard so much about this damn drink on social media forums and like my mommy groups prior to going. It has quite the reputation. And I don't know, maybe it's because my formative years were in the 90s when drinks like Kool-Aid and Sunny D and Hawaiian Punch were all popular, but I didn't really find it as bad as I was hearing leading up to the appointment. I mean, it was sweet, yeah, but I pretty much just chugged it down. Like I didn't really have a problem. And thankfully, my results came back normal. So I do not have gestational diabetes. Yay, small wins. But while I was there, I asked about my weight gain. Why? I don't know. I don't know. Lesson learned. Like, if you know what, if your doctor doesn't bring it up, then it's not a big concern. So, like, don't ask if you don't want to know. That was like a big lesson I learned because I'd finally hit 201-pound mark. Yeah. I mean, that's the first time I've ever seen a 2 in front of my weight in my life. So, so I asked how she thought I was doing. And I will give her credit. She did preface it by being like, you know what? Some women gain a lot, like no matter what they do. She's like, but in saying that, I do feel like you've gained more than she would have liked to have seen. Which, what does that even mean? Yeah, like I would love to gain only like 10 pounds in this pregnancy, but it's been more like 30 so far. Like, is that good or bad based on my body? My body. Like, not compared to like Julie, fake name, but like Julie over here, that's like 100 pounds prior to getting pregnant. Like, her and I shouldn't be in the same consideration. Like, she is going to gain weight differently than me. Right. And it was frustrating to hear because I have to say, I eat pretty damn healthy, like not just for a pregnant person, but like in general. I'm not drinking, which, right there is a whole lot of empty calories that I was consuming in the past. I don't drink much other than water. And even when I go to restaurants and I just want like anything other than water, because I just get sick of drinking water, I've been getting like Arnold Palmer's because lemonade can be sweet and I don't want to just drink lemonade. And so, you put some of that unsweetened tea in there and it just kind of like helps. I mean, I have a sweet tooth, but I also eat very little processed food and I eat a ton of fruits and vegetables and whole grains. And I've even switched my diet to be more plant-based options and reduce my intake of animal meat and byproducts. And I hear these women on these forums that pretty much like live off of fast food when they're pregnant. And it made me wonder if their doctor was telling them the same thing. Like, yeah, I can cut down on the sweets, but you know what? I had already cut out alcohol and sushi and prosciutto and steak tartare and like, what the hell else do you want from me? Like we're over here making eyeballs and we're forced to roll out of bed like a log because I can't just sit up anymore. And you want me to also give up my donuts? Like give the girl a break. I will say being a first-time mom means we have this ignorant bliss that we'll never have again. Like we don't really know what we're getting ourselves into. So we can just focus on things we're excited about, like picking a name or decorating a nursery or wondering what she'll look like and what her personality will be, guessing what sport she's going to play or if she'll play an instrument, imagining her like just the cutest holiday outfits and like costumes possible, or focusing on the traditions that we want to pass on, like cooking with her. Like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to cook for her and with her. Because I have to say, I'm a really good cook. Like I'm not just saying that, like I legit know how to cook, okay? And I am maybe I'm not so great at just like making random things up. I feel like my dad's really good at that actually. But if you give me a recipe, I can do it. And I remember cooking with my mom growing up, and I loved that. Like, we have several family recipes that I would help her make, like JFK waffles, which, oh, JFK waffles are waffles that my grandmother used to make. And now all of the women on that side of the family know how to make because my grandmother was this like big fan of John F. Kennedy Jr. And one time his chef's waffle recipe was printed in the newspaper. And my grandmother started making them. And now it's like become this family recipe, which, you know what, it can be yours too. If you just Google it, I'm sure you'll find it. But in my house, the only waffles we eat are JFK waffles. Like, I don't order waffles from the restaurant because I know that they're going to be a letdown compared to just like this crunchy on the outside, but like soft and airy on the inside JFK waffles. Like, one of my best friends actually calls them cloud waffles because they literally just like melt in your mouth. They're like amazing. And now I kind of want some. But they're like they're like a McDonald's cheeseburger in the fact that they have this like very unique and specific flavor. So, like, if you did a blind taste test of a McDonald's cheeseburger versus like any other burger, it doesn't even matter. I bet that you could pick out the one from McDonald's. It's the same for these waffles. Like, you can't replicate it. And one day I will teach my daughter how to make them. And you know what? We're going to have JFK waffles on special occasions, just like I did growing up. Because one, it's also an excuse for me to have them. but but no, it was like something special that I just really loved like growing up. And I want to pass that down. I also can't wait to take her to the park or like her first museum or put cookies out for Santa on her well, probably not her first Christmas because she'll be like what 2 months old or like 2.5 months old, so probably like second Christmas. But I can't wait to make her Halloween costumes each year like my mom did. And I mean, I've already decided what she'll be this year. You'll just have to follow me on social to see that for yourself. I'm not gonna give you the surprise early, but I can't wait to hear the questions that she'll ask and like see what she's into. And I can't wait to get to know her as a person. And these are things that new parents think of. And I think a first time parent is the only time that we can truly focus on the positive because we don't truly know the negative. It's like the opening credits of MTV True Life. You remember that show growing up? Like, it's not on anymore. I think it should be. They should bring it back. But it's like their opening line was always, "You think you know, but you have no idea." That's parenthood, right? That's first time parenthood. And from this perspective, when current parents have nothing to say other than negative, it really makes me think like, why the hell did you become a parent if you hate it so much? Like, seriously, that's like the thought that comes into my head. Like, if you knew your life would suck so much, then why did you have a kid? Because when parents speak negatively, they never really say anything positive other than like the very obligatory, but it's the best thing you'll ever do. Well, you know what, Susan? It sure as hell doesn't sound like the best thing that I'll ever do. It sounds like the worst decision I've ever made, according to you. Like, the first time parental bliss is swift and it's fleeting. We only get 9 months of it. And that's only if the pregnancy went smoothly. Because if it didn't go smoothly, then you don't even get that. So I just beg you, just let us live in our ignorant bliss like a little longer before you crush all of our dreams. I will definitely come to you when I haven't showered in days and I'm crying in the middle of the night, okay? But for now, just sharing our excitement and respectfully, maybe shut the F up. And you know what? I think it's only appropriate to talk about the difference between fantasy and reality first time parents make at this point, which is something that I learned about as I've been learning about the phenomenon called, and I may say this wrong, but like matrescence, mattress, matrescence, if you want to Google it, matrescence. And matrescence is basically a female's transition to motherhood and the emotional response to this new role. Because we hear a lot about baby blues and postpartum depression, but this is different. Matrescence can start during pregnancy, especially the third trimester, because you're more and more impacted by your pregnancy, right? And then it continues through the first year of the baby's life. And psychologists equates this to adolescence. That's why it kind of sounds the same, matrescence, adolescence, right? Because it's based well, it includes mental and physical changes that are triggered by fluctuating hormones, just like when you go through puberty and you thought you were done with that. Well, apparently you're not. And I've always considered myself a really emotional person. And for a long time, I found almost like the need to apologize or make excuses for that. And I'm sure that that probably comes from some sort of trauma from childhood or being like told not to cry or something. But at this point in my life, when there seems to be such a lack of emotional intelligence, just like in the world, I consider it a strength. I am very in tune with my emotions and the emotions of others. I'm not perfect, and sometimes I may miss signals and stuff because you know what? No one is. But I would rather be emotional than emotionless. So, since I've become pregnant, I've been focusing on the rational part of the brain when researching topics. Like I got the obligatory book, like What to Expect When Expecting, and it gives you very logic-based account on what to expect during your pregnancy. I've read countless articles and tutorials on the best products or tips or tricks of parenting and caring for a newborn. But as an emotional person, I was yearning to understand more this transition into parenthood. If this is the biggest thing we ever do in our lives, at least according to pretty much any parent I've ever spoken to, then it has to have a profound impact on us mentally. No? And I'm not just talking about our ability to love the child or whatnot. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm actually most interested in the emotional impact it has on ourselves as people. And as I turned 40 this week, I I kind of consider myself a little bit like set in stone. Like I'm very confident in who I am and what makes me, well, me. But what about when you add the title mother or father to our grown-up self-identity? Because it's called matrescence or maybe that's just my like Chicago accent coming through. I don't know, matrescence. But you probably could change that to a P because I'm sure dads, go through this too to some extent. Um, but when you think about the title like mother or father, what does that do to our grown up self identity? What does that do to us emotionally? And that's when my Googling resulted in the term matrescence. So I wanted to understand this more, and it seemed like exactly the kind of information I was looking for. So I downloaded an audiobook that while I was doing these walks, I could listen to. And the audiobook is called, and I really recommend it. It's called What No One Tells You: A Guide to Your Emotions from Pregnancy to Motherhood. And it's written by two psychologists. And I'm sure over the next couple of months, I'm going to be sharing tidbits in future episodes as I continue to read it and or listen to it, and I find it very helpful. But one idea that stuck with me that relates to the first time parent bliss that we were just talking about is the idea of separating your fantasy baby versus the reality. So basically, when you're pregnant, you have two versions of your baby. One is your real baby, and then one is in your belly. One is your real baby, and that one is the one in your belly. That's the one that's kicking you from the inside. And you may know like the genetics about them, you may know their heart rate, you may know the sex. But technically that's like all you know about them. And it doesn't have any bearing on who they're going to be as actual people. Like that's it. And the other baby is your fantasy baby. And this is the one that I started to talk about during the bliss period. This is who you imagine your child to be. This child and everything you imagine about and for them is not based on reality. It is purely based on you and your response to your own childhood and your current beliefs and surroundings. So, for example, if your husband is like this really fun and easygoing guy and you're having a boy, you may imagine that that boy is going to be just like your husband and attribute characteristics to your unborn child that are the best versions of your spouse. And Christian and I totally do this. Like, we imagine she'll be really into sports and fitness because we are. Like, we love to talk about, is she going to play tennis or is she going to love riding her bike? Because those are things that we love. And they're things that like we imagine we could do with her. And this imaginary human is what can lead to feelings of disappointment when you find out the gender. Or maybe you have ideas of what it would be like, a lot of this happens. Like when people find out the sex, boy or girl, sometimes I can honestly say I was not disappointed. I truly was fine with either because I could see the pros and cons of raising a boy or a girl. But some people get disappointed, right? Like they find out maybe they really wanted a boy and then they find out it's a girl and then they're like disappointed. But the fact they even really wanted one of them in particular is really comes down to this fantasy that you have in your head of what that's going to be like. Like maybe you have an idea that raising the opposite sex might be more difficult and it might be easier to relate to the same sex child. Or maybe you had a really awesome relationship with your sister growing up. And so you want a sister for your first child as well, right? Like it could be based on anything, but like it's your idea of why you want a certain sex is totally based on this imaginary thought of what it's going to be like, right? It can also lead to disappointment when your actual child, the one that's going to come out of you, is not like you imagined once they arrive. Or maybe if you aren't the parent you imagine, like maybe you thought you were going to parent in a certain way and you didn't end up doing that. Or being a parent is different than you thought. And this book had a great thought that I wanted to share that like really kind of hit me in a way that I wrote down on my phone so I wouldn't forget. It said the biggest challenge of being a parent is to see your child as they are and not who you want them to be. And it seems so obvious and simple, but difficult at the same time, doesn't it? Like I think about that statement and I relate it to my own parents. Like there's been so many times in my life, especially in my adult life actually, that I have felt like I've disappointed my parents, or worst case, like they didn't even like who I had become because we were so different. Like, they just didn't even like me. Like they loved me, but they didn't like me. And these feelings were really a result of me feeling like I wasn't who they wanted me to be. And that's the last thing I want my child to feel. And you know what? I'm pretty sure that my parents would say the same thing about me. Like that's the last thing they wanted me to feel. So the book also says that this is, by the way, totally normal and it's okay. It's just really important that you need to realize what is fantasy and what is reality. And you need to allow your reality to be different and then accept that with open arms and hearts. And I still think that there's something magical to be said about the first time parental bliss, but they have a good point. And it's important to not get too caught up in who we think she'll be. So we leave it open for who she actually becomes. Because really, isn't that the most exciting part? To see who these little people actually are and whether they pick up a tennis racket or not and become the next Serena Williams and I can just retire and she can just pay for our lifestyle and I can watch her on ESPN and Wimbledon. But, those are just dreams. While the second trimester has come with its challenges, the best part has been the connection that I'm starting to build with my little girl. She's very active, like her parents, and I feel her really all throughout the day. Especially when I eat, I get kicks, or if I sit or lay down, I get kicks. And sometimes it feels like she's just straight up dancing in there and rolling around. And you know what? I hope she is. I hope she's throwing a damn party in there in preparation of joining the rest of us. It's crazy to think that we're in the home stretch now with less than 3 months left. And this last bit is going to fly by. And I'm going to be going to the doctor way more often. We have a baby shower. We're taking prenatal classes. We're setting up the nursery. Like, it's all starting to come together. And it's all starting to feel a bit more real. The challenge for me will be admitting that as I get bigger, I have to accept more limitations on what my body can do. And you know what? That's okay. It's only natural when you're carrying around an additional 30 plus pounds in your torso. So it's important that I continue to give myself grace throughout that period and, continue to enjoy it as I have the second trimester. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts. Join me on my social channels to get more content and inspiration. You can follow my Almost Midlife Crisis on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also check out my new YouTube channel with videos of the episodes and shorts to keep you entertained all week. And subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you are always up to date on the latest episodes. Or you could just, go right ahead and subscribe at myalmostmidlifecrisis.com. Until next time.